Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the show. John Henry Soto here, and I am very, very happy to be here. I'm happy as always to be here. I am sad with the episode that we're doing. Well, not sad. I mean, we're celebrating the life of a great man, and we're happy that you're here with us, ladies and gentlemen. As always, George Batista is with us this evening, and we're going to be talking about Quincy Jones today and the legacy of Quincy Jones. And we say sad, and we realize, 91 years old, and what a life well lived. And you start thinking about, I mean, what else can, what else could he accomplish in the 91 years? It's just like it's so sadness is not necessarily. Rick Beato did a whole thing on this actually, and talked about that as well, and how it's there's sadness in that you won't hear his voice with the wisdom and his words and stuff, and music and things like that, but just grateful that he was alive and that he was here, and that he was able to leave us so much music and just a great thing.
Yeah, agreed.
So, how you doing, George?
Fantastic, and but I'm glad we're doing an episode like this because he musically is one of my heroes. Just
Oh
just
yeah.
as far as me, I actually it's interesting that we're doing this because years ago I bought his box set of his hits.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's called Q. I forgot. I have it somewhere in there, but it's like Q's box set of greatest hits, Quincy Jones' greatest hits, and I burned it. With all the great hits
Yeah,
that I
yeah, yeah.
remember growing up as a kid. He was kind of the like part of the soundtrack of my youth. Of
I was
all the
just gonna
stuff that
say
he
that. I
did.
was gonna say
Yeah.
exactly that. He was the sound. I mean, in the '80s, you and I were teenagers in the '80s.
Yep. Hmm.
That's when that's when he lived. I mean, that
Yes.
was the thing. I mean, that was when he was an incredible. The '80s were so good, and yeah, it definitely was the soundtrack to our lives. Quincy Jones,
Yep.
um, and yeah. So today we're going to be celebrating the life of Quincy Jones. We're going to be talking about his accomplishments. We're going to be talking about what he means to future producers, and also we're going to compare his the time when he came up, where he was really successful in the '80s, to current. Can this happen again? So we're going to talk about those three things. And first, we're going to start off with some of the accomplishments. Incredible. I don't know if you have some statistics you want to go over. I have some as well, so we can go back and forth. Hello,
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
on
Yeah. Go.
TikTok.
Go for it.
Welcome. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
so
Go for it.
28 Grammys. He's got 28 Grammys out of 80 nominations, making him one of the most awarded and nominated artists in Grammy history. He's got 79 Grammy nominations. He held the record for most Grammy nominations, showcasing his unparalleled influence across genres. He produced, y'all might know this album, but he produced the best selling album of all time, which was Michael Jackson's Thriller,
Yeah.
selling 70 million copies worldwide. It's still to this day, it is the most successful, the best selling album in the history of music. Um, who did not have Thriller?
Yeah.
Who did not have Thriller? And even today, my kids, you would think, because of the new music and how Spotify and all these other music platforms have really, it's not the way it was before. There's no MTV, there's no place today, there's no radio where you hear, you know what I mean? You
Yeah.
would think that they wouldn't know who Michael Jackson is. They absolutely know who Michael Jackson is. They know Thriller, they know Billie Jean, they know Beat It, they know all those songs, they know them, and it's like that's going to be the case for a very, very long time. He had 14 movie scores. He composed 14 major films, including The Color Purple and In Cold Blood. He was the first American vice president of a major record label. He broke barriers by becoming the first African American vice president at Mercury Records in 1961.
Wow. Wow.
1961. I mean, we still had a lot. The civil rights movement was still in full effect.
Hmm.
And Martin Luther King was out there. I mean, this was a time when a black man really couldn't even enter certain places.
Right.
I mean, just incredible. So, um, what are you doing over here? Oh, I see. So, just an incredible, incredible achievement. And you talk about breaking the barriers. I mean, how many have come since? I mean, now it's like there's just so many now, and it's just a wonderful thing to see that.
Absolutely.
7-decade career. His career spanned over 70 years, covering everything from big band in the 50s to contemporary pop and R&B. A lot of people you may not know, but he did work with Frank Sinatra, and he did the arrangement for the "Fly Me to the Moon" uh, track that we all are so familiar with. That was Quincy Jones back in the 50s.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like unbelievable. Album producer of over 300 plus albums. He produced and contributed more than 300 albums, influencing artists across multiple genres. 1,000 plus compositions. He arranged, composed, and conducted more than 1,000 original musical works, demonstrating his prolific output and versatility. He was awarded the Kennedy Center Honor back in 2001 for his contributions to American culture through performing arts. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2013. Quincy was inducted into Rock and Roll, underscoring his significant influence on the development and recognition of modern music. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is always like interesting because you think, well, he didn't really do rock, you would say.
Right. Right. I
A
know.
lot of it was R&B and jazz and things like that.
Hmm.
But then when you listen to even just Beat It, and you listen to Van Halen's solo in it, and um, Steve Lukather's guitar in all those tracks,
Yep.
those were really pop R&B rock records. It's
Right.
like
Right.
it was hard to even. That's why they were so big, because they can just go through all the genres, and people who like rock would like Beat It. People who like R&B would love Billie Jean.
Yeah.
People who love, and Thriller was like an epic thing in its own. It was such a huge monster. So it was so much. The music was so diverse that it had so many elements into it that it can really spread out to a larger number of people.
Absolutely. It's interesting. When you look at his background, you you wouldn't think that he would have, especially when he started, you wouldn't think he would have been in any of that stuff, right? Because
No, I
he's
know.
got a bebop background.
Yeah.
He literally started. And for those who are not, don't know him, I'll talk a little bit about how he started, because
Yeah.
first of all, he grew up in that era of, he was involved in a lot of shady stuff as a kid. He was involved in gangs. He was involved in crazy. His mother was a schizophrenic who was committed in front of him. Literally, she was taken away in front of him, raised by his dad, and had his brothers and all this. And he ran around with a tough crowd. He admit, he says it. He says, I got into a lot of fights and scrapes and cuts and all this type of stuff. He was heading down a bad path, and he ended up breaking into an armory, and there was a piano in there.
Mm.
And he saw the piano, and he just started tinkering with the piano, and that completely changed everything. And literally from that point forward, that when we always talk about the decision, right? That was the decision. He said that was it. He says music was there for the rest of my life. And from that point on, he got into bebop and jazz because he started seeing guys like Dizzy Gillespie and Duke Ellington and all these guys. He started seeing them, and he said, I want to do that.
And he was
And music, and he says it, music filled that void that he had from
yeah.
his childhood, and it completely made him a different person.
Yeah. And music filling the void, that's some of the things that we talk about a lot. A lot of music, a lot of musicians were missing something.
Yeah.
There was something that was missing. The ones that got into it heavily, like you and I listen to music. I mean, music is we are lovers of music, right? But not just music, right? But it's the idea of creating it. It's the
Right.
idea of the what it makes you feel, of
Yes.
listening. I love listening to even new music. I'll go out and hear a new band or something and hear a song, and the song does something because the melody line is very catchy, and I think, wow, okay, they have me,
Right.
and when you get that feeling, it's such a wonderful feeling. But it's because there is stuff missing. There is a void, and it kind of fills
Right.
a void and makes you, and it brings you up to a certain level, an
Right.
aesthetic level that you can feel better about whatever it is that you're involved in. That's why
Yeah.
music is so powerful. And
Yes.
and I've said this numerous times on this show. It's the most powerful thing on earth to
Yes.
me is music, because it transcends the whole planet. I mean, you can go anywhere in the world. If I play some music, they're gonna understand fully what I'm doing. They're gonna duplicate it. It may be a different genre, it may be a different style, it may be even different notations, right? Like
Yep.
the
Hmm.
scale for in Indian, music is different, than our scale, right? We have,
Right.
all the scales can can uh, can fit into different genres and to different cultures.
Hmm.
But ultimately, it's the vibration of that note that enters a person's soul, and there's nothing more direct into a person's soul
Yes.
than a musical note.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important, because even vocals, and Paul McCartney talked about this in a little clip that I saw, where he says, something with the vibrations, because it's not just vocally, because yeah, you can hear a voice and you can hear the words, and the words are really emotional and they'll make you cry. But when you listen to classical music, and just instrumental classical music, and you're like, oh my god. So it's not just lyrics, it's something else, and
Yep.
it's that vibration that really just gets you, and it's so powerful.
Well,
And
it's
Jones just knew that.
oh, absolutely, 100%. He knew it, and it's that thing. I've talked about it even on my show, right? The power of music, even in healing, right? Because if you think about it,
Oh yeah.
I had a woman on my show who was a PhD who worked with people with cognitive issues, and she was a music therapist. And the things that she explained to me were unbelievable concepts. But the one thing you realize, even in people who have cognitive impairment, people who have dementia, Alzheimer's, all these things, they don't lose music.
No,
They don't
no,
lose music. Okay,
no.
they may not remember somebody's name, or they not remember a certain thing, but they'll remember the lyrics. They remember the lyrics to a song or the chords to a song, and they remember how to
Something
play it. You know?
There's something spiritual about that. The
Yes.
body is not just the body. I mean, it's a spiritual thing. I mean, there's a clip online that I saw, and it was an elderly man, and he's playing. He's got musicians around him, and they put a keyboard in front of him, but he can barely. He's kind of like this. He can barely move. I mean,
Right.
it's got to be like almost 100 if he's not 100.
Mm.
But he was like, and they started playing the stuff, and they just put his hands on the piano, and he started playing.
It's
He's not playing. If you can
incredible.
look it up. It's on YouTube. It's on like
Incredible.
a whole bunch of places, and he's just playing. And
Wow.
and he's like, and he's loving it too. Like he's creating this thing. He just knew he knew where everything was, and it was just like so emotional to see that.
Right.
And you'll see like kids, like you said, the whole Mozart experiment that they had,
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
baby Mozart, and they're playing all these, and it did actually do something.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
made the child more present. It
Yeah.
made them more lively. It made them more uh, something. It's hard to explain it, but and that's the thing about people who don't get it, because it's hard to explain.
Yes.
And if you don't
Yes.
feel it,
Right.
if you don't feel it, like I'll be in the like music has to play in my car whenever I'm in my car, right? That's
Me
just
too.
and
Hmm.
it's either I'll either have light jazz playing just because
Right.
if I'm having a conversation with my wife, or if I have people in the car, my kids in the background. If I don't, like, sometimes I'll start driving, and the thing didn't start for whatever reason, it
Hmm.
didn't connect to my phone or whatever.
Right.
So I'm driving, and then my son will be, wow, where's the music? you know, and then my daughter will be, oh yeah, right. Where's the music? I was wondering, well, something was wrong, and then I got to fix my phone, because it's just part of those who don't feel that, just aren't. It's just it's hard to explain.
Yeah,
It's
it
just
is.
really hard to explain. But music is in everything.
Yeah,
Music is in everything. It's like you can't watch a film today without music.
that's right.
You can't watch a commercial without some kind of music. You can't watch anything on TV without music. Everything has music in it. You know, from they've even taken and people will be like, oh God, but they'll take these. Have you seen that when they poke trees with these electrode things, and then they attach it to like musical instruments, and the vibration from the tree will start playing like
I've never
notation.
seen.
Dude, you gotta go on YouTube and you
Really?
gotta type in. They put these things into the trees or into a plant or into anything, and the
Right.
vibration, and they have it run it through like a keyboard, or an
Right.
instrument that has actual notes on it, and the notes they'll start playing. I mean, like
That's
music.
that is
Yeah,
wild. I didn't
yeah,
know
it's
that.
crazy, and it's because it's alive. There's
Yeah.
vibrations there, and
Yes.
it may not be intelligent in the sense that we understand it, but
Right.
it is alive.
Correct.
So it just shows that we are all these organisms, that the vibrations fill us. They give
Yeah.
us something, and spiritually they connect us to something.
Right.
So anything that's alive can react. Anything that's alive. You see like even when they play in the zoo, when they play music for like some of the animals, you'll see them relax. You'll see
Hmm.
them chill out. It's like, and you can go on YouTube and see that as well. I mean, those a lot of the stuff that we talk about here is not, and even Quincy Jones has talks a lot about the power of music, and he says how it's the words, we can write the words and stuff like that, but the music is God's voice. The music
Yes.
is the vibration that's
Hmm.
given to us, and we somehow mathematically, because it's also a very math is a big part of music as well.
Right.
Like if you take the simplest scale, like the pentatonic scale, if you look at the notations, it's basically a math equation,
Right. That's right.
and each note is a vibration within that mathematical equation. Now, what does it add up? I don't know. We could all just make up our own equations, and we can all just mess around and put them in different places, and it's how we put them together is what makes someone emotional and makes them want to hear it, and makes it connect to them spiritually, and they remember something in the past. It's like, why do we hear a song a million times? How many times have
Mm.
you heard
Oh.
Rush
Oh my.
music? How
Oh my
many times have I
gosh.
heard Stevie Ray Vaughan songs?
Yeah.
Or even just the ballads of the 70s, and those nice ballads with those nice melodic things. Simon and Garfunkel. Why do we continue it? Why is it that 70% of all music that's streamed on Spotify, old music,
Old
30 years
music.
or older?
Yep.
Why? Because that music, the music of today, is like more generated by computers, and a lot of it is it's heavily produced. It's heavily auto tuned. So there's a lot of other elements that are going in. Not to say that that doesn't create that effect on some people, you know,
Hmm.
but there's a more purity, in my opinion, anyway, to a guy with a guitar with a
Yes.
message.
Yes.
And this is why those songs are still so important and why they resonate till this day. It's because music is the key thing. Um, we're talking about Quincy Jones, right?
Yes, we are.
Um,
We could do a whole show just on that. I mean.
well, the thing about it is that Quincy is all this that I'm talking about.
Well, that's true. You're
He
absolutely right
represents
because
all that. I
he
mean,
was
he
he
grew
does
it.
represent all that. He absolutely 100%. He was a genius. He had it. And also so when we're looking at his life, he was he goes through the bebop phase. He learns a bunch of instruments. Right.
Oh yeah,
He was big on the trumpet, but he loved a
played
lot of
so.
instruments. But he really got, and then this is where you start to get like who the people around you, right?
Yeah.
Especially in successful in those types of things. This is where he starts to befriend people like Ray Charles,
Oh
right?
man.
He loved Ray Charles. Ray Charles loved him. Ray Charles he said he was like a brother to me, and they start working together. Sinatra was the other guy that mentored him. And what I didn't know was very interesting. Sinatra used to wear this ring that the Rat Pack he gave each one to the Rat Pack. He wore for like 40, 50 years. He would wear this ring. He gave it to Quincy.
Really?
Yes, and Quincy Jones he says Sinatra gave me this ring. He says I'd never take it off. To the day he died, he had that ring on.
That's awesome. Wow, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
I mean, but Sinatra loved him. Sinatra loved him. He conducted a lot of his stuff, like you said. He produced a lot of that stuff as well. He did a lot of his live shows. He was the conductor of a lot of his live shows. And interesting little tidbit, by the way, because remember we're going back to the 50s and 60s in that era when Sinatra, because Sinatra would go out and his backup was actually Count Basie's band, okay, and he tapped Quincy to be the conductor of Count Basie's band, so they would go travel. Now remember, this is during the height of that whole segregation era, right?
Yeah,
So when Sinatra would go play a certain place, especially in the South, well, the band and Quincy had to stay in a separate area.
right.
They literally had a hotel that was segregated away from Sinatra, and initially Sinatra didn't know it, but then when Sinatra found out, and this is why I'm a those of you who know me, I'm a big fan of Sinatra, not only because of his
Huge
music, but
fan.
because of a huge fan, but also because of the
Sinatra
man.
and Sammy Davis to me
Yes,
are
yes,
the two
100%.
guys that for me are
But
like the
but
guys.
also because of the man he was.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and Sinatra went up to the main the guys who put the bill on and everything and said, "Oh, no, no, no." He says, "You get those guys out of there, or I'm not playing."
He did the same thing for
For
Sammy.
Sammy, yeah. He
Yeah, he did
said
the same
he
thing.
goes, "Those guys stay where I stay, or I'm not playing." And they literally changed the whole thing.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and Quincy talks about it. He says, "What that man did for me is just incredible."
Yeah, Sinatra, there's a lot of controversy behind Sinatra and I was just having a conversation with someone because we were talking about I'm gonna detour a little bit, not too much, but we're still on track here. But they were saying about who's the greatest singer of all time,
Right.
and I've always said that it's Sinatra, and I've said it because not because it was a common thing to say or a unique thing or either a common or unique or very rare or out of the ball. Not because of that reason, because he generally was a great vocalist. If
Yes.
you take a Sinatra song today, any song, you go back and you just take one of these "Fly Me to the Moon" and all those classic songs from back, and you try to sing it using the inflections and the
Yes,
phrasing
and the
that he
phrasing.
used,
Yeah, yeah,
you cannot do it. It
yes,
is so hard. And I'm
100%.
talking about like professional singers.
Yeah,
They struggle with that. Like I know Michael was it Feinstein? I think
Feinstein. Yeah, yeah,
Feinstein. Yeah, he's a great singer, great musician, and stuff like that. He talks so much about that. Michael Bublé, who's I guess it's the more
hmm,
pop guy, who's also kind of doing that. Same thing.
yeah,
Sinatra was the guy, and for Sinatra to have that ear and that vocal butter that he had that was just
yeah,
incredible to then pick Quincy to be the arranger because Sinatra was like tough in the
he
studio.
was. Yes,
He did
yes,
not want to do more. He wanted to make sure he got the right takes. He did it over and over again. He would be there all day long. This was his job. He loved doing it and he was really good at it, but he was tough. So trusting Quincy with the responsibility of putting it, and this was when Sinatra had gone through his baby phase,
right,
where he was like a teen idol and
right.
girls were screaming and stuff, right? This was all early on. We're talking about, what are we saying, 1930,
Yeah, third, fourth, yeah, 40s, yeah.
1930. Like there was one clip that I saw of 1922, like
Wow.
really, really old, and like almost right after the silent era.
Yeah,
And for him to trust him and to say, and right after that whole period where he was a teeny bopper kind of a guy, to then come and be able to like say, I want to arrange these things this big. And I'm trusting it on this guy. And he had other arrangers and he's worked with other people as well.
sure.
But just the fact that he trusted him with so much of the early work, because
Yeah,
this is when Sinatra was now making the leap from that to like an established guy. And
right.
Sinatra was established all, when he first played, we should do a show on something. Have you ever done that?
We haven't done it.
That's so ridiculous. Because you and I sit here for hours sometimes
I know.
after a show talking about Sinatra like idiots. Yeah, I don't know how we haven't done that yet. But when he was with Count Basie, he played
Hmm.
with an Eric Dorsey band and stuff, and he
Yep.
was
Hmm.
with those guys originally, and he was just with their band. He was just a
Right.
singer in their band. It wasn't
That's
like
right.
it was he was the leader. But
Yep.
after he got kind of canned from there and stuff, and
Hmm.
he was struggling, and then he went into the Paramount, and he was like, I don't think anybody's going to come to see me at the Paramount. And he was way wrong. Obviously, everybody
Yes.
came to see Frank Sinatra. Why? The voice captures you.
That's
The
it.
voice just captures you because he had such control of what he was doing and what he was communicating. And for me, the greatest.
I
The
agree.
greatest. I was talking to my daughter about it the other day in the car because I have a whole playlist that we play, and she loves some of the songs. Like she'll be playing it.
Nice.
She actually posted something the other day on Instagram, and had a Sinatra song, "Fly Me to the Moon," as the background.
Nice.
That's the
Nice.
song. So just to me that's like an amazing accomplishment. And Quincy was just that guy that knew what to do.
Yes.
He didn't
Right.
have an ego. And in the music, I mean, look, Quincy was not a perfect man, and there's things that have been said about him.
Hmm.
There's things that I
Hmm.
don't know about him because I didn't know Quincy Jones.
Right.
I only knew the music. I only knew the accomplishments that were public. So I didn't
Right.
know the man, but there is a video of him talking about how at the age of 85 he kind of, I don't know if you ever saw that clip. It was like a longer interview with him, but in one of the segments there, he says how at 85 he realized he's trying to work on releasing bitterness and
Yep.
hate,
Hmm.
and trying to clean himself because he realizes how it just holding a grudge, all these things that he had. And you start thinking to yourself, how could a genius like that hold you know what I mean? He's got it all. It's like, why would he? But obviously the music is just so part of him, and he's just a man. He's a man.
Well, that's yeah, and that's the issue because part of his issues and flaws too as a man. One of his big flaws was that he couldn't hold on to a marriage. And again, it goes back to that thing that we talked about, even including with Burt Bacharach and guys of that who are genius
They're
at that
just,
level.
yeah,
It's
they're
very
just
difficult.
obsessed
Yeah,
with
they're
that. And,
obsessed,
yeah,
and he had he had 7 kids, but it was very difficult. And even his past wives talked about it. They said he was so, and then he became so in demand through those years that they lost him.
they
They just
lost them.
lost
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
And he talked about that. He talked about his, because remember, he also hung out with Sinatra, the Rat Pack, all those guys, and partied like it was, forget about it, and
yeah. I can't
drank
even imagine.
drank
But
like crazy. Okay,
the
drank
fact
like
that he
crazy.
made it to 91 is
Well,
just
that's the
America.
thing because he had near death experiences in
Yeah.
his 80s. He ended up in a diabetic coma in his 80s for 4 days. Okay,
Yeah.
because he drank himself into it. And he was lucky to be alive, and he had to give up drinking and all this and kind of change his life towards the end because he realized, he was overindulging.
Yeah, and it's funny because you would think that he'd be more on top of something like that because he already had, the scare in 1974, right, where he had the
Right, when he had the
brain
operations, a brain
yeah, he
aneurysm.
had
Yeah,
the brain aneurysm. So I mean, you would think he already had the fear that
yeah,
he could be gone, but sometimes the that part of you is just uncontrollable, and
right,
there's just so much life to live. You want to do it all, whether
right,
it's good or bad.
yeah,
And there's just that part of it. But I think one of the biggest influences that, obviously with the Michael Jackson thing, I want to talk a little bit about that.
yeah,
Such a huge impact because he also did the Off the Wall album too,
yes,
which
yes,
was sort of like the beginning of like that birth of what Michael Jackson was going to become.
right,
But he was talking about Michael Jackson in the um, I can't remember now what song it was, but Michael wanted a certain thing. He wanted, like, oh, he didn't want the violins in Off the Wall, Don't Stop to Get a,
Oh yeah,
he,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. He didn't want the violins. He's like, yeah, I don't want the violins, and he was like, no, I'm gonna, of course we're gonna keep that there. He said it messes with my groove, and he's like, no, you're crazy. We're gonna leave it there. And of course, it turns out to, when that song comes on, that is like it. I mean, that's
Right.
like one of those songs that you put on and everyone just wants to dance.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
um, so the fact that he was confident enough. Now, this was in the 70s, so he already had a little bit of a background. This is the
Hmm.
guy who's worked with Sinatra and has worked with all these guys already. So he had a little bit more, pull and say in the
Right.
studio, and Michael Jackson was still young pub. But for him to know, and not even to be of that music, because he's
Yes.
more of the jazz, he's more of the
Right.
bebop, he's more of this Sinatra, big band, and he's done all these kind of things. And here he is in the 70s doing a R&B dance disco pop record with this kid named Michael Jackson from the Jackson 5,
Right.
and but he was just aware enough to know that this is going to work, and that to me is just incredible.
Yeah, that's the genius again, because he looked at Michael as a he knew immediately. He talks about it. He says I saw something in Michael. He says, first of all, he goes, I remember him from the bubblegum pop, stuff that he did when he was a kid. He says, but I had this vision of being able to pull him out of that and bringing him into the present time, and making him a big thing. And he says, and he says, so I just saw it. He goes, I don't know how he saw it, but he just saw it. But it's not, and then so it's that, to having the foresight of that, but then also having the vision of who he surrounded himself with as far as musicians. Think about
Mhm.
think about the musicians on Off the Wall and Thriller. You had Steve Lukather, you had Jeff Porcaro, you had Dave Fillingans, you had Greg Fillingans, you had Eddie Van Halen to come in and do this, some of this stuff.
Right.
All the guys from Toto, these unbelievable. These were the best music. John J.R. Robinson. Okay, these were the best musicians at the time.
Um,
Late '70s, early '80s, that were, and he literally got everybody together in a room to record these amazing things. So he had the ability to see that ahead of time and know who's exactly the right person for each spot. I
mhm.
mean, it's
And what
incredible.
they
It's genius.
and he also had, I saw an interview with him, because obviously there's a lot of stuff going around now. I saw another clip with him where he was talking about also letting them do their thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not being so overly, like Steve
Right.
Lukather talked about that, right? Where he was like,
Yeah.
he said he just missing something, I don't know what, and he just kind of he added the little thing on human nature,
Human
you
nature.
know,
Yeah.
and,
Right.
and he
Exactly.
added that little thing, and that was like, man, it was so simple, but it like filled it up and just made the song, and it was
Yeah.
like, just he said, I don't know, just do something, and he just listened to it and he was like, that's it, that's what I want,
Well, that's
and
the same thing with the same concept with J.R. Robinson in the beginning of A Rock with You. When he
yeah,
talks about it, he said he had Quincy on one side and Rod Temperton, who was
right,
the other genius behind the Michael stuff as
all right,
well. And
right.
they were like, there's got to be something you can do, an intro, something you can that that everybody will remember. And he comes up with that. "Dum, da-da-da-gum, daga-daga-dagum, ba-da-da." I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it was like, I mean, who doesn't know the intro of that? You can literally just play that and stop it. Everybody's gonna know what that is.
of course,
Yeah, that's what he came to. He said, "Yeah, come up with something that the world's gonna remember." I think that's what
right?
Quincy said to him. Come up with something for the opening that the world's gonna remember. And John's like, "Okay, like no
Sure.
pressure there, you know." But one of the things that he was talking about when they asked him, because he was in this interview, they asked him, did you know in when you were in the studio working on Thriller that it was going to become the thing? And he was like, well, he goes, that's how you always go into it. You always want it to be that. And he goes, and
Right.
it wasn't an accident. It was like he says, and he said something interesting. He said, you don't listen to 600 songs and just pick nine. by
Yeah, I
King.
did see that. Yes,
You
yeah,
know, it's like
yeah,
you have those 9 or 10 songs that you picked out
yeah.
of the 600, probably way more songs that you were listening to,
It's incredible.
that had to be perfect.
Yeah,
So this is what they did. It's
yeah.
like, and then it made me kind of look at it and go like, that's right. It wasn't like they just sat there and suddenly they wrote Thriller and they wrote Billie Jean and
Right,
they had these ideas floating around. They had all these songs. They had all these stuff to draw from, but you have to draw from the right well, and that's where the genius comes in for to be able to pick the 9 songs that are going to be the song or the 10 song, the 12 song, whatever it is. It's not an easy thing to then put them
no,
together and make them fit together. I think of one album, just breaking away from, but I think of Sting,
mm-hmm.
10 Sumner's
Ten
Tale
Summoner's Tales. Yeah,
album. Like I love that album.
yeah,
Like for me, that album is perfect.
yes,
Like all those songs, they fit so well together. They sound so fantastic together. And I'm thinking to myself, how the hell did you write these amazing songs to fit so well in this compilation that you would not be able to I can't imagine them in any other thing. They just fit there, you know? And so that's the genius of what albums were back then.
right. No,
Albums are
exactly.
now we have singles and now everything is lost. It's sort of like we've gone backwards because we used to have only singles back in the day. Like, it was only singles during the Elvis Presley would have a single and it
Yeah,
would go on the radio and then there was no albums, and then the 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 bands that really made an album thing was like the Beach Boys, the Beatles, the Stones,
right,
Led Zeppelin. They were, the Who. They were the ones that kind of like would put out an album, and people would be like, "Oh, just a group of songs that fit well.
right,
I like that idea,"
right.
and they popularized the album idea. I'm sure probably before that too, but or somebody else, but they were the ones that really made it like a cohesive thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's an interesting story. Just really quick on the song "Human Nature," because
It's
and
a
again
great
goes
song.
back to the genius of seeing things. Human Nature was actually written by Mike Porcaro, who was
Mhm.
one of the guys in Toto and a keyboard player, and he was tinkering around with it, wrote the song. Okay, he wrote it actually for his kid who was having trouble with a bully or something like that in school, and said that it's human nature. It was a very
Yeah, and it was
interesting
almost
take.
like not even like it was all like not really a song that he was planning on putting anywhere. It's sort of like a
Correct.
joke.
It was a B side actually. It was a
Yeah,
little
it was
B
kind
side,
of like
and
a
he was in the
together.
studio next door just tinkering, and somebody came in and said, "Hey, do you have some leftover stuff?" And he said, "Hey, listen, I have some stuff here, And he gave it to him, and Quincy heard the B side and heard the thing, Human Nature, and boom, that was it.
He's like, I
There you
like
go.
that.
You have Human Nature.
Wow. I mean, it's unbelievable. But there's songs like that. You listen to another guy that I really love too. That um I can't remember his name now. That's how much I love him. Um, what's Glenn Campbell.
Oh yes.
When you listen to Glenn Campbell's stories, also songs are like, well, he had a song over there, and he had it, and I heard a couple of notes of it, and I was like, oh, well, Paul Williams,
Right.
he writes a song that goes on a commercial, and
Mm,
it's just the commercial is playing, and it's
right.
a Monday, what is it, Rainy Day Mondays, but it's
Oh,
like
okay.
it's just a commercial. If the
Right.
song is just a commercial, and the carpenter,
Right.
the guy, what's his name,
The
Richard,
brother, Richard
and
Carpenter. Yeah.
yeah, Richard, and he's like, what is that? He's, I love that melody. Who wrote that melody for that commercial? It was like there's a commercial, and he found it. Then they re-recorded, and the rest is history. It changed their lives. But that's the ability to stay open,
Yeah.
to be able to accept ideas and accept inspiration from all different areas,
Right.
and don't look down on anything. Whenever you meet somebody, that person might have the magic sauce that's going to help what you have, and it's going to help it rise. You just
That's
don't
right.
know where it's coming from. That's why you have to kind of keep an open mind on stuff like on things like that and be able to embrace it. You know, I
Absolutely,
think Quincy
100%.
was one of those guys that was just open to things, to trying things. You
Yes.
know, and if it worked, it worked, and if it didn't work, it didn't work. You know, and um, but fast decisions that
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know, that I
you
call
don't
that good. You
you're
know,
not you wouldn't be able to put together a "We Are the World" with
this is
all
actually something
these
I wrote down
people.
because I wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, just incredible the people he got together for that thing.
So let's talk a little bit about that because we'll the equivalent of what that was back in 1985 to today, right? So we're looking
Right.
at now, what is that, 40 years, 50 years, 60, 100 years? Um, so we're looking back. So the equivalent, those guys that were in that room were the best at the time. They were the
Yep.
best of the best of the best,
Right.
right? I mean, obviously Michael Jackson was there. Um, Hall and Oates was
Hall and Oates,
there.
Lionel Richie, Bob
Lionel
Dylan, Ray
Richie, Bob
Charles,
Dylan, Ray Charles,
Michael
uh,
Jackson, Diana
Diana
Ross.
Ross, Kenny Rogers,
Yeah.
Kenny Loggins, the singer for Journey,
Yep.
um,
Simon LeBon.
yeah,
No, not. No, actually,
that,
Simon
that,
LeBon was there too. I
he
think
was there
from
too, but not
yeah.
him.
Oh, Steve Perry.
Steve Perry was there. So all these, those were the top people. Billy Joel,
Billy Joel. Yeah. Yeah.
who was
Kim Carnes. Yeah.
there. What's her name? Was she there? Dionne Warwick was there. Was she Dionne Warwick there? I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. Was it the only
'Cause I know they
one?
worked together later on, but
Yeah.
I think she was. I don't remember. But
Oh, Bruce
regardless,
Springsteen, of course.
Bruce Springsteen, yeah, we are the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the documentary that's on Netflix right now, it really, really just shows the how difficult it was, first of all,
hmm
and how Quincy had to be managing because
There's egos.
there's egos that are the size of mountains. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
and just getting them to actually work together was wow.
Right.
Um, but I start thinking about today.
Mm.
Could the biggest names in music, now we're talking about, let's name them out: Taylor Swift, um, Beyonce, um,
Adele.
Adele.
That's kind of sad.
Well, I'm sure that we're just not. I guess we also have to be. We also have to be a little bit. We're not. I love Adele.
Right.
I love Adele. I think Adele is like
hmm
amazing. She's out of all
Yes.
the ones that we've just named.
Even though you called her a
She was
cow,
the
but
top.
yeah,
What was that?
you called her a cow.
I did. When did I do that?
Something about a purple cow or something.
No, I forgot about that. No, so a purple cow, it's a unique thing. It's an actual, it's a musical term. But no, she's actually not now. She's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And she was always gorgeous. She's fantastic. But out of all those that we've just named, she to me is the top of the creme for me anyway. But
hmm
then you also have Ed Sheeran,
hmm
maybe John Mayer you can put in
Right.
there. There's a ton of artists, right? I mean, if I go right now and I say, current
Harry Styles,
top Harry Styles.
which I kind of like him actually. He's got good music.
So, if you start looking at the top right now, you say Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, Billie Eilish,
Oh yeah.
Ariana Grande, The
hmm
Weeknd, Drake, Eminem, Bad Bunny,
Yeah.
Justin Bieber,
Right.
um,
Justin
so
Timberlake.
Justin Timberlake. That's right. So these are Diddy. Um, so these are people that and you get them all in a row.
Apparently he did.
Yeah. hey, hey, why is this Kool-Aid fizzy? Um, so but is there anyone other than a Quincy Jones type that can get a room filled with all these guys, with all these amazing artists today? And I don't think that there is, because I don't think there's
No,
anybody that has the name that Quincy had.
no.
They called him Q, and when nobody that I could think of right now. And you can talk about Jay-Z, who has pull. You can talk about what's his name from the guy. uh, Forgot his name, but um, so it's gonna be almost impossible, because I don't think that there's anyone right now today that would have that kind of pull, unless you pick somebody like, I don't even know who. There's
No,
nobody. I can't
there,
think of a
there,
name that would be able to do it.
there is
Honestly,
nobody because he transcended. I mean, you know,
that's another
I'm gonna tell you.
good
Let me tell
point.
you something. Huh?
Because all those artists, that's a good point. Like Kenny Rogers and Michael Jackson are not in the same thing. They're
Correct.
completely
That's what.
different.
And
Cyndi
here's
Lauper,
the.
I forgot about Cyndi Lauper, who
That's right. Here's the thing that you said. If a guy like Sinatra, who pretty much everybody goes like this to,
till
is
this
going
day.
to pick that man to arrange your music and to be your conductor and all this, you have to have an unbelievable amount of respect for somebody like that. Okay.
Incredible.
And here's the thing. I would recommend everyone who's interested in really wanting to see Quincy. There's a great Netflix documentary on him called Quincy. Okay.
Yep.
But there's one section in there that is, I'm just, you realize the power that man has, the power of humanity that man has. Okay. Because he has his assistant, right? And he tells his assistant, he says, well, we're putting together this like a, what do you call it, a gala for whatever cause. Okay. So he says, so he tells his assistant, can you do me a favor, can you call Streisand, call Sinatra, call Brando, call this one, call that. I mean, he's listing names and I'm going like
To
this.
him,
And
it's just his Rolodex.
like, just, yeah, it's just like,
But his
like
friend.
calling your friends down the street. And
Yeah.
there's one section that was, he was a little bit younger in that one, but then when he was older, he's doing another gala, right? He's like, we got to get some people here. He goes, well, did you guys call the list that I gave you? And he goes, yeah, well, we called Oprah and we got voicemail, or we called Oprah and they said we didn't get it, and we called Colin Powell and we couldn't get him. He goes, don't worry about it. He takes the phone. He goes, hey, Colin. He's like, yeah. He said, do me a favor. Can you do this thing for me? He's like, I really would love for you to be here. He says, because you know what? He goes, and then like they chop the conversation. He's like, okay, great, thank you so much. Because he goes, he's coming. He calls Oprah. He's like, Oprah, man, I can't wait for you to be here. Can you love me? I mean, just like that. And then they show later when he's actually in the backstage, and Colin Powell walks in, and Colin Powell says, "Hey, what's up?" And they have a camera because they're following him,
Yeah.
and he shakes his hand. And Colin Powell says, "I'm here because you called me."
Yeah.
Just like that. Just like that.
Well, that's the thing. That's the power. I mean, who has that today?
No, nobody. I mean, not
Nobody
not to
has
that
that.
level. There's no
Not to
way.
that level. Not. There. I know that there are guys that are very, very respectful. I know that what's the big time producer, David Foster.
Oh, David Foster. Yep, yep.
He's got
Or
like
Rick Rubin. Guys like Rick Rubin.
Rick
Yes.
Rubin. I mean, these are guys that I would bet my money on a Rick Rubin doing it
Yes. Yes.
than even and Foster too. Foster's a little bit older, so
Yeah.
he's worked with older guys, but I think Rick Rubin would probably be the guy that can make the phone calls to the biggest names,
Right.
and they would say yes, well, they'll show up. He's the only one that I could even think of
That's right.
that even has
Right.
a chance, and
Agreed.
not even the kind of chance that Quincy had, but just comparable with today's today's way.
Right.
I think egos are always going to be a factor when
Yes.
the world tells you you're fantastic and you're fantastic and you're fantastic, and you start buying into it, and you're in a bubble because you're constantly being moved from one place to another because you're a commodity and you control, you control the stock market with your
Yeah.
presence, right?
Right. Right.
So when you hear that enough, and somebody says, "Well, we don't have chicken today; we only have lamb."
Right.
Well, the people are going to be like, "Oh, this is crap. I'm great. I'm fantastic." So the ego thing will be always a thing that you have to kind of like balance out. And to some degree, ego doesn't bother me. Like when I see certain people that have egos, when it's justified. Like
Yeah.
if Michael Jackson had an ego, I'm like, yeah, that's Michael Jackson.
Of course.
The guy had owned the monkey. I mean, let him have. He's got an ego. You know what I mean? Elton John.
Hmm.
Big ego. Yeah, it's okay. It's Elton John.
Yeah.
Diana Ross, who I've heard stories about. It's all good. She's Diana Ross, for the love of God. Leave her
That's right.
alone. So I think when it makes no sense for somebody who's maybe not who maybe has a lot of sales and a lot of money and a lot of power, but just doesn't really, for me personally anyway, doesn't. Then that's where the egos. So somebody like Rick Rubin, I think he can manage. He speaks so rationally.
Yes, he
You
does.
know what I mean? That I can't imagine him having a conversation with anyone and upsetting them.
Right.
You know
Exactly.
what I mean? Like this is why I feel about Quincy Jones. Like I,
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
Quincy would be emphatic in his point if he had
Yes.
to get a point across, but I don't think he would upset the person to the degree where they don't want to work with him. Because
Right.
who's gonna walk around saying like, "I refuse to work with Quincy Jones"? You know what I mean? And just destroy your whole career. It's like nobody's gonna do that. It's the same kind of thing with Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna go walk around saying, "I don't want to work with Rick Rubin."
That's
You're,
right.
you're lucky if Rick Rubin knows your name.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And this is a guy. Rick Rubin is like a little bit different than Quincy because obviously he's a producer.
Yeah.
He knows what he hears is good, but he doesn't. He's not a musician.
Right.
He doesn't play an instrument. He doesn't know read music. He doesn't do any of that stuff. He's just a guy who knows when he hears something, this is the right thing. You know,
Right.
and Quincy had that plus the music chops. So this is where
Right.
they're different in the sense that they're just two different people. But
Well,
um,
yeah, and you're right. That's a great point because Quincy comes from the side of being that struggling musician.
he
He
knows
comes
it.
from the side of actually doing it, right? He comes from the side of when he started again, back when he started, he was a struggling, trumpet player. He talks about walking out of the little jazz clubs with his trumpet under his arm and his music and going to different clubs and just trying to get into these, places
Yeah,
and stuff like
yeah.
that. So he understands that part of it.
Yeah, and also the struggle of starting again after the brain aneurysm. He couldn't really play the
That's right.
trumpet anymore because of the
That's
pressure
right.
of his brain, so he couldn't do
100%.
that anymore. So it's almost like restarting again in '74,
Yeah.
and Off the Wall was only a few years later.
Yep.
And then so it's like that those 10 years from '74 to '84, when Thriller came out in '83 or '82. Those 10 years he became Quincy Jones, even though he had
Absolutely.
already a reputation of an incredible producer. But it was
Yeah.
almost like he had a second wind that was
Exactly.
even 100 times greater than the first one.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
that to me is really an amazing life. So yeah, what else? Oh, the music industry today.
Mm.
So you know, we are living in a time where if you get 100,000 streams on Spotify, Spotify pays you $340 if you get 100,000 streams. So this is where we are right now. Where you know the music industry has been sabotaged by you know an industry that saw the potential and money. Now this is nothing new because in
Right.
the beginning of the music industry, Capitol Records and all that, they were run basically by yeah.
Yeah.
And so they did that back in the days too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then they'll give somebody here, yeah, here's 100, 200, 300, $500,000. It's yours, but we're gonna take away
Hmm.
everything you spend, and we're gonna, and nobody knew that back in the day, and then now everybody kind of knows that.
Right.
Now, so they had to find another way to do it, and they did it through streaming services. It's bad and it's good. It gives people an opportunity to be heard. It gives you a platform where you can actually share your music with more people than you would if you were by yourself. But the tools that are on the internet right now, and I think Quincy talks about this in an interview, that the interview that I saw, you can be more in control of your music today than you ever were, and make a
Hmm.
living off of it if you decide to do the work. This
Right.
is where the laziness comes in, right? Because some of the artists today have been so, and I know this because I work with artists, but they've been so programmed into believing that the record company is where you have to go. The goal is still that. That goal is gone.
Yeah.
That goal is not.
Yeah.
Yes, they do sign people. They do. They stare that. It's still it's a dying dinosaur, but it's still a dinosaur and it's still walking, right? So, but in today's world, if you take the responsibility and do the work, and I think about it like with our band, George. Recently you and I, we George and I had a band back in like in the early uh in the 20s, I think. We had a band 1920, I think was it. No, but we had a band a long time ago, and we recorded a lot of songs that we till this day still think are really good songs. They were
Hmm.
rock songs, they were in the alternative range or whatever you call that era of the 90s, the early 90s to mid 90s. But the songs kind of went away, and I was like, you know what, I have a little bit more knowledge in my head now. So I had one of the songs, I had it remastered and had it cleaned up really really well, and now it's on Spotify. And I thought to myself, well, if we had the ability back when we were doing it to just take the responsibility of working on, I mean, we're not young men, and we have a song on Spotify, and we can promote it now. It's
Right.
like, but we're not a playing band anymore, but it's like an opportunity to do something. So younger bands, and the thing that I always say to them is like, and I'm sure, Quincy, I don't know the specifics of his what he said, but I know you talked about this. If you just decide, now I am the music business.
Hmm.
I am my music business.
Right.
I am my record label. I am my marketing team. I am my creative team,
Yeah.
you know? And you just start doing that and take on that viewpoint, you have a much better chance of making a living. And there are companies out there now that you can actually pay and will help you build funnels and things like that to get your music heard and on placement places and things like that. There are companies now that are specifically do that because that's the money. And I would much rather pay $500 a month to a company that's going to work for me to do all those things and to help me get out there than for me to hopefully get signed by a record label, which you don't know if that's going to happen anyway.
True.
And if it does happen by some miracle out of the thousands and thousands and thousands of artists that are out there and you get chosen, you're not going to be given what you're worth.
Right.
And they're gonna put you on Spotify, and Spotify doesn't pay unless you're getting Taylor Swift streams. You're not making any money off of Spotify off of these things. So this is something that I moving forward, and the reason I brought this up now at the end, talking about Quincy Jones, is because this is what our future looks like. What does a producer of music look like? Now I'm in that industry. I'm trying to produce artists and trying to help artists kind of get some recognition and get their music out there. I have one particular artist that I'm working with right now, Christopher, who's fantastic, and but the difficulty is the the ground is not the same as the ground was back in the 70s,
That's right.
but yet we have way more opportunities, but
Right.
there's just way more work that has to be done in a different way. So it's the viewpoint that has to shift. Can
Yes.
a producer come around again? Somebody like a Quincy Jones? Absolutely, absolutely. But it's got to be somebody that understands the technology of how the business works today.
Yeah.
and takes the artist and smacks him around into thinking and smacks out the idea that this is the only way you can do it, and that you have to sell, you're going to sell merch at a table at your shows, and you got to get somebody to collect your money there. You got to get somebody to think bigger outside the box and think more with the using the tools that are out there, the AI tools and all the stuff that's out there right now. And I think that that's the only way that we'll ever see anyone close to a Quincy Jones. And I don't think that we'll ever see it in our lifetime. But somebody that can do something like that is going to have those that idea and that those viewpoints.
Completely agree. Just really quick, because I know we're getting to the end here. For those of you, and again, to show you the power of what this person has meant to the music industry and to artists in the music industry, if I would just tell folks, take a look at a YouTube clip, short clip of the Kennedy Center Honors, who
Oh
are
yeah.
honoring Quincy Jones. Ray Charles.
So,
Ray Charles singing the song called My Buddy for him. If you do not cry when you see this, there's something wrong with you, because this will make you cry. I sat there
yeah,
and
actually, I haven't seen it in a while. I want to watch it.
tears streaming down my face, and his face. He's there
Yeah.
because, number one, just the power of the moment, but number two, what Ray Charles also meant to that man, because Ray Charles took him in
And the
also.
history that they have.
Yeah, the history
That
together that they have,
history.
that they worked together, but they were like brothers. And Ray Charles was only a little bit older than him, so really they
Right.
came up together.
He did.
And at the time, Ray Charles was a sensation. At the time, he was a young sensation.
Oh
And
man.
but just, if you guys watch that clip, holy cow, it is just so moving, and it shows you the power of the friendship, of the music, of the man. Just incredible clip.
Yeah, I think that particular moment was incredible, and I
Yeah.
think we're going to end our show with it. May not be the clearest thing, but why not?
Wow.
So we're going to present now this clip here. It's Ray Charles. Let me know if you can't hear this.
Hey, question. This is me. You know what? Nights alone. Since you went away, I think about you all through the day, my buddy. My buddy. Your buddy misses you. Oh, Quincy, I love you, man. I love you.
Ooh. Oh,
Wow.
yeah, that's nothing else to say.
No.
Want to thank everybody for tuning in. Appreciate y'all. Um, Go out and listen to some Quincy Jones music, whatever it is. and support music. We'll be back next week, same time, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you, George, as always. I'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. God bless. And as always, peace.